All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our discussion for today. Today I'm going to go over the information that we reviewed in class on Tuesday. Please keep in mind that as you are looking for this assignment, go to Canvas Assignments. It's a 17-1 graphic organizer, and the assignment is going to be due on Tuesday at 11:59. So Monday you have the chance to do the worksheet. Tuesday we will review, but at the same time, please make sure you're finding this information and doing your best to realize what circumstances these three individuals as dictators come to power and what allows them to essentially have total control of their governments, and how their rise to power leads to a lot of the circumstances we see in World War II, specifically between Mussolini and Hitler. All right, so let's get started here. We can start with the one that came to power. From a standpoint of longevity of being a dictator, he was the longest of the three, and he actually served as an ally for the United States and Great Britain during World War II. So, and that is Joseph Stalin here. So let's see if I can get this. There we go. So Stalin's Soviet Union, when he comes into power, he takes over for Vladimir Lenin. When Lenin passes away, he's like the next guy in control. But the one thing he really does he tries to publicize or at least make public all businesses in the USSR. So meaning everything that is made in the country of Russia, the Soviet Union, it's going to be controlled by the the government. So the government's going to employ people. They're going to give people paychecks. So they're going to set the wages and all those and the prices. So this is what Stalin really wanted to try to do. He also tried to create collective farms, which would be state-run. So as peasants owned their each individual farm throughout the course of the Soviet Union, what Stalin asked people to do is he asked all the farmers to give up their farms. Again, most businesses are farms at this point. The government owns the land, takes it from the people, forces the people to live in these larger buildings that are constructed for multiple families. And in these cramped quarters, these families have to work the land combined, essentially, in the name of the government. And instead of running your own farm, where you decide the crops that are produced, and as a result, you're able to, take the information, take that, the food that you make, the crops that you grow, and then what you'll be able to do is you'll essentially be able to sell them yourself and make your own profit. Stalin wanted each of these individuals to work for the government, produce the food, and then the government could make all the particular price amounts that they wanted to. They could pay the farmers at a certain wage. But the problem with this was when you put the peasants on on these farms, the government sometimes, as many governments do, not just communist and socialist governments, it's that they do a very inept job of running these operations because they're not farmers themselves. They're not experts. All right. Rapid industrialization occurs between iron, steel, oil, and coal workers. But the idea is that there was no money that is funded towards housing for the people, clothing for the people, nor any consumer issues. So if you're trying to buy an item as a consumer, whether it's clothing or other factors that make your life more meaningful, the money's not put towards that in this way in the Soviet Union. So all the money's put towards things that help to industrialize the country, to make the country more militarily strong, and also to help the country essentially grow only on behalf of the country. So, but a lot of the people were convinced that doing this for what they called Mother Russia at that point was the best deed you could do. If the country succeeded, everyone succeeded. And that was the mentality that people had. At least that's what they were told. Standard of living falls, and as a result, people begin to suffer. All right. And then people that start standing up to him, obviously with these collective farms, public businesses, industrialization, the standard of living falling, you have enemies coming forward. And as a result, Stalin takes these enemies and he sees them. If you're someone in power, the total complete control of power, essentially if you have that amount of power, you've become very paranoid. And Stalin, as a very paranoid individual, purges his enemies. Again, either these enemies were real or they were just made up. And he said, you know what, I think you're going to be an enemy in the future. You have done nothing yet, but I'm going to take you and arrest you anyways. And again, most of the 7 million people that were executed or forced into labor camps in Siberia were innocent victims of Stalin's paranoia. None of these people really did anything bad towards Stalin. but he saw them as being negative towards his growth, or at least the power that he had. All right. Next is Mussolini. Mussolini is a former newspaper man, so he's someone who uses his ability to manipulate the media, specifically newspapers and radio in Italy, to get the people to follow him. So he organizes fascist groups throughout Italy. Obviously, there's a big demand for some strong leadership in all three of these countries, and why these dictators come to power. But essentially, he Mussolini attracts those who are displeased with the Italian government, and he brings people in and creates these black shirt groups, essentially, that were used to terrorize and remove opposition, and essentially use force, whether it's towards people that were against him and his ideas, or whether it was towards the government. This is something that he used quite often as black shirts. These individuals would go around and terrorized and remove people who were opposition to his ideas. When he takes control of the government, he actually threatens to march on Rome after the coup of the Italian government. And the Italian king, again, the king is not somebody who is voted on or the people choose. He's somebody that, he claims, the king would claim, that God chooses to be leadership of Italy. So the Italian king actually makes him prime minister out of fear once his followers march on Rome. And this is something that happens quite a bit. It happens, a good amount. I'm not saying the marches happen, but sometimes if you want to try to, you can't beat him, you join him. And so Mussolini's made prime minister, and as a result, he just begins to completely degrade the political freedoms that people have in Italy, eliminating all political parties and suspended all elections, meaning that he would be in power forever. This creates a dictatorship. Right? And in his dreams, moving forward, was to forge a new Roman Empire, sort of what Rome had before throughout most of the Mediterranean. And you go further east of the Mediterranean, specifically east of like Syria, Israel, present-day Israel, and going to other parts there. But the only issue is the first country he tries to take on is Ethiopia, and that is the only country he's actually able to take control of, because Ethiopia doesn't have much of a military at this point. And Ethiopia doesn't even have much of a military today. But Mussolini's goals here are very evident of his ability to persuade people, because he is a media mogul. Essentially, he was a newspaper editor, and actually one of the videos I posted on the Canvas this week, it's like supplemental videos. It's in like a new heading for this week's module. If you watch that, you can see Mussolini's attempts to manipulate the media to get people to see good things about him. And he became a newspaper editor essentially as prime minister, getting people to see certain things. But when it came to actually acting, he is nowhere near as successful as Stalin, what we've seen before, and nowhere near as successful as this guy. Adolf Hitler, obviously he's a failed art student. He struggles throughout the course of the post-World War I years, and he tries to get by, and he starts seeing how poor people have become in Germany, how much Germany is suffering with the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And as a result, he joins the Nazi Party. He begins to highlight German racial superiority. He begins to explain to people that the problems that are caused as a result of what Germany is facing right now, whether it's losing World War I and the economic problems and the sanctions that Germany had to pay Britain, France, and other punishments that Germany had. You can't forget about the idea that Hitler believed and convinced the people that the Jewish population was the entire problem that Germany faced. All right. Now Hitler, even though he was a failed art student, he was an extremely gifted public speaker at knowing where the pressure points were on the people, how to talk about them, and then to push and lean on that pressure to get people to really, start to listen to him. All right. When he takes parts and controls of the government, he actually, his first stint as the Nazi Party, he begins to take his followers and tries to lead a coup on the German government. As a result, that coup fails, and he spends 9 months in prison. That's where he writes his book, Mein Kampf. And that's really where the racial struggle begins. And this actually arrest and imprisonment is actually something that makes Hitler extremely famous in Germany, because you hear somebody who's speaking on behalf of the German people and trying to see Germany become better. So some people actually wanted to know who this guy was, and they looked up his book, they looked up who he was, what he believed in, and started reading and listening to those things that he would say. When he got out of prison, he continues to speak, and he's able to gain a lot of influence as a result. All right. So he suspends free speech when he finally takes over the government. When he's made chancellor, I mean, actually, in the one election he does attempt to run, he loses. But the winner of the election, the president, makes him chancellor, meaning control the entire government. I'm going to put you in control because the president sees how popular his movement has become, and as a result, you start to begin to see the clamping down of almost every single aspect of every single thing that we hold dear in the United States in terms of freedom of speech and all these other freedoms that we have, and things that the Bill of Rights and the amendments of the Constitution protect us for. A lot of these things are ended. He waged campaigns against those who opposed him. Stormtroopers helped to get rid of undesirables. I know there's this one story it's called the Night of the Long Knives, where he gets rid of at least 100 of his opponents. It's like almost like a sneak attack. Like, think of like the Italian mafia, someone going in and assassinating somebody in cold blood. He has 100 of these things happening over the course and throughout Germany and other parts of Europe as people who stand up against him. And it's called the Night of the Long Knives, and that's really where he gets rid of a lot of his opponents. All right. One thing he does do is he and this is something that is illegal and is done in secret because it violates the terms of the World War I the Treaty of Versailles. He spends to rearm and rebuild the armed forces, and this is all done in secret. What happens is, and how he successfully makes this work, he turns factories and he makes them look like elementary schools from the outside. So if planes from Britain and France fly over Germany, they look to see if anything's getting rebuilt. He actually has these things from overhead look like schools, and if someone were to drive by doing inspections on Germany to see if they're rebuilding the military or not, he drive by it with what looks like a school, and on the inside of this factory, while there may be kids inside learning, which is like a facade that's put up, he actually has factories building weapons for war, tanks, guns, and he starts getting men into the military. This is all done in secret. But he also creates many public buildings to try to get Germany back to work, because the Great Depression again now hits, and he uses this as well to rally the German people towards one cause. And the building projects that he creates is almost like the New Deal in the United States, putting all these building projects together. He creates the Autobahn. He gets the Olympic Committee, the IOC, to agree to have the Olympics in Berlin in 1932, I believe it was. Those are the same Olympics that Jesse Owens, a United States African American, kind of wanted to put it to Hitler and his ideas of racial superiority. But as a result of these building projects that are done in Germany, there is zero unemployment. Now, even though Hitler is a complete and total megalomaniac with his infatuation of killing off an entire religious group and the Jewish population of Europe, this guy did a lot for Germany, and he was very popular in terms of not only what he said, but more or less what he did through those messages. And that was about the construction of public buildings, rebuilding the military, convincing the people that what he's doing is best for Germany. People bought into it, and they believed him 100%. All right, he actually begins to increase and expand German territory, which is to increase national pride, because there are Germanic peoples throughout a lot of Europe that are living under a flag that is not German. So he invades the Rhineland, the place that was the area of the western part of Germany that was taken away after World War I. And he starts to annex Austria without firing a single shot. His troops march in. Some of you ever watched the musical The Sound of Music, or ever heard the musical The Sound of Music? At the end of the movie, that's when we see Nazi occupation in Austria, which is the country that the musical is set in. And then the parts of Sudetenland, we'll talk more about this later on this week when we talk about notes, and you'll see some of this as well. But you see that lands like on the outskirts of what's now present-day Czech Republic, and there are parts and little sections and blobs of this area that are these are Germanic peoples. They speak German, they write in German, they have German cultural customs, but they're in the Czech Republic in the present day. So Hitler convinces a lot of the world to allow him to take Sudetenland, so he gains this territory, and he uses that as a way to unite the people even more, to rally support, to increase national pride. All right, I have 3 great videos that I posted on each for Stalin, Mussolini, and Hitler, and you can see how each of these individuals really take the opportunity to see the struggles of their countries in the midst of the Great Depression after World War One, and they use that to their advantage to gain a great foothold of power in their country. All right. Well, that's all I have here for you today. Remember, get those worksheets done and those graphic organizers. I'll see you guys later.